Life Audio.
Hello, and welcome to the Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic podcast. I am your host, John Seidel. This is your home for real stories, radical vulnerability, and remarkable comebacks. In the end, this podcast is a place for the desperate, the downtrodden, the destitute, and especially the drunk. But it's also a place of hope and healing. I know that firsthand because I'm the Christian who became an alcoholic, not the other way around. Today, I've found sobriety after decades of struggling. But more importantly than finding sobriety, I found Jesus. My prayer is that as I interview people just like you and just like me, along with professionals in the fields of trauma, faith, and addiction recovery, you will find the peace that is available to you through Christ on the other side of whatever you're going through and whatever addiction that might be. Because let's face it, we're all addicted to something. So welcome. Let's get radically vulnerable as we explore what it looks like to be on this journey of messy sanctification. We'll be right back after this. You know, there are plenty of lies that kept me stuck in destructive drinking. And one of them is that being a creative person is fueled by alcohol. And I think it's that idea of Ernest Hemingway, right? That, you know, you're locked away with a typewriter or computer now, and by being buzzed, the juices flow and you put out your best stuff. And so if you have ever believed that lie or thought that, this episode is for you. Today on the show is Kristen Bear, and Kristen is a creative. She is a model. She is an actress. She spent time in New York City and LA, and she chased the dream of stardom and fame and believed the lie that alcohol fuels your creativity. And so I'm really excited to talk to her today. She runs a community called Creative Sobriety. And so basically she has taken back that mantra, that lie, that belief that being creative has to come with drinking. And so she runs this community now in the Nashville area. She has a Substack, and she's going to talk about the lies that she believed that led her to really just being like, what am I doing? Who have I become? And so she has some great quotes. She talks about, you know, being the fun girl that drank to escape the shame and the pain that she didn't tell anyone about. There's aspects of that in her story. There's aspects of being a chameleon, right? You know, as an actress, as a model, I think she learned to be a master chameleon. And I think you don't have to be an actress and a model to be a master chameleon. I think those of us who have gone into destructive parts of drinking, we have learned to be chameleons. We have learned to hide. We have learned to change our colors. And so Kristen is such a great resource. And I think especially if you are a woman who struggles with identity, who struggles with body image, who struggles with being the perfect version of yourself on Instagram, this is a great, great episode for you. Before we get there, I just want to remind you that this podcast is based off of a book that I have coming out, Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic. If you would want to support that endeavor, you can go to Amazon. You can go to Baker Bookhouse and pre-order the book. Comes out October 7th, and a lot of the stuff that I talk about in these podcasts is fully unpacked and fully fleshed out in the book, and I would love to have it in your hands on October 7th. So with that said, let's talk to Kristen Bear about creative sobriety and what it looks like to be a creative without alcohol. Kristen, thank you so much for joining the Confessions podcast. I am so excited to have you. We have a bunch of things in common that I want to talk about. Spending time in New York City. We both lived there, kind of what that was like. I know there are some things in my recovery that I'm like, oh. And so I am just so excited to have you. Thank you.
I am honored to be here. Thank you so much, John.
So for people who don't know you, why don't you just introduce yourself, right? Because I think there's some things that come through that a bio can't capture. So introduce yourself. I'd love to hear about you.
Yeah, well, my name is Kristen Bear, and I grew up in a small town in East Tennessee. And from the time I was a super young girl, I was fascinated by the creative arts. I wanted to live in big cities. I wanted to have a creative job. I dreamed of being in TV shows and movies and living in New York and all those big glitzy things. And so I started chasing those dreams from a really young age. When I was 18, I moved to Los Angeles and was pursuing acting, and in a roundabout way ended up in New York City working as a fashion model in my 20s, and then started doing some TV and film and moved back to Tennessee and did another stint in Los Angeles. And somewhere along the line there, I started questioning what I was reaching for. I started questioning what my foundation was and what my goals really were, and I was feeling really unfulfilled with sort of the payoff that I was getting. And I struggled in every one of those cities at one point or another to feel good about myself and to feel enough. And I would often find myself leaning into partying to connect with people and to kind of soften the insecurities that I felt in certain rooms. And eventually that caught up with me. And by the time I was in my early 30s, I had moved back to Tennessee from LA and woke up one morning and realized that, ironically, all of these creative dreams that I had were being completely really railroaded and blocked by my drinking habits. And what I thought gave me this sort of creative edge and kept me wild and a free spirit, and was actually the opposite. It was really holding me back and affecting my mental health. And so, yeah, I would consider what happened for me in early 2020 to be a sort of spiritual download. It's the only way I can describe it. I woke up one morning, knew that the only solution was to quit drinking completely, and made that choice and never looked back. And from that has come really this whole other passion in my life, which is speaking to people about sobriety, especially creative people who have felt for a really long time that drugs and alcohol in any way enhance their creative talents. Because I know I lived in that sort of lie for a long time. And the truth is that it really blocks our intuition. And to me, that's spiritual, and it blocks those spiritual downloads of creativity. And I love telling people what I've found on the other side, which is that sobriety is everything that I thought drinking could be, and more.
Yeah.
And that I've never felt more in tune with my creative gifts, with my spiritual gifts. And it's the best decision I've ever made. So now I don't ever shut up about it.
Right. I think I saw a joke like one time, like, how do you know someone's, sober in recovery? It's like, just wait, they'll tell you, And I'm like, yep.
Eventually
Guilty.
You'll know.
Yeah, guilty as charged. Okay, so there's a lot. Thank you for giving that overview. And I want to go back to certain parts of the story, but I want to hit this part because I think it's so true. And if people, check out of the episode now, I think I want them to hear this, which is there is definitely a lie out there, especially with people who are creative. There's this image of the starving artist who's living off of bourbon and whatever else. and like Ernest Hemingway, they're constantly getting just inspiration through the spirits, right? For lack of a better term, right?
Oh
and
Lord, yes.
and it's like and it's worship, it's glorified, right? And I think
Yeah.
you nailed it. I have never been more creative in my life than since I've stopped drinking, right? Like it's insane. I explain a little bit the kind of stark contrast and difference that you've experienced in your creativity since getting sober.
Oh my gosh. I think it's like the lines of communication are blown wide open when you remove that barrier of the toxicity. Because at the end of the day, alcohol, weed, drugs, whatever your thing was, it's this negative, low vibrational, toxic energy that we're bringing in. And what that does is it blocks the opposite of that, which to me is where creativity lives, right? It lives on that same plane with like love and joy and progress. And so if we're constantly consuming this like negative substance, negative energy, the line of communication to that positive thing is just so small. It's like so there's only so much that can come through. And I also think that creativity is a super spiritual experience. So I kind of equate the two of like creativity, spirituality, creativity and intuition. All of those things to me are very much the same thing. So it's like blocking that passageway to the divine, is kind of the same sentiment. So for me, it was like removing alcohol, removing drugs, removing the low vibrational behavior that goes along with those things, really opened up the pathway. And it's just like comes pouring in now. I can touch it so much more easily and so much more quickly. I can get to that place. I can get to that flow. And I just feel that I have a sense of confidence and a sense of follow through in my creativity that was missing. I might have some ideas, right, that would surface, but I could never follow them all the way to where they needed to go. They would sort of get lost in the fray of the drunk or whatever it was, and I could never get back to it. And now, as a sober person, I have a creative idea. I flush it out and I see it through and it becomes whatever thing it's going to become. And then that gives me confidence and I just keep building on that, And so it's just a new way of processing. And to me, just so much more efficient, so much more effective, so much more rewarding to be sober and a creative artist, and I'm an actor, I'm a writer, and I just feel like I can tap into those parts of myself now in a way that wasn't even remotely available to me when I was drinking. Zero.
Absolutely. And you would have thought it was, right? You would have been like, oh, this is great. So let's go back to the beginning of your story. I'm curious, when did, you talked about having this, obviously you grew up as a creative. At 18, I think you said at 18, did you move out to LA at 18?
I did, but I say that as if I had some sort of well thought out plan or like opportunity. No, that was just me being a rebellious young person and really believing though that I was meant to do something really creative and different. And so, I moved to LA with my best friend from high school and we had no clue what we were doing other than we knew we wanted to be there and in the mix of this thing. And turns out it was just, I was a pretty naive young girl who had no clue what kind of things were out there. And so that was, I met a lot of people, good and bad. I had a lot of new experiences, good and bad. And a lot of that time is actually what would create and shape, my tendency to drink, to kind of erase things that I wasn't proud of or try to run away from traumatic experiences. A lot of that stuff happened during that time when I was a young woman.
So when did you start to notice that your drinking was becoming a problem?
I would really love to think that there was a time at some point when I wasn't drinking at a problem level, but I just think that I didn't drink when I was really young. I didn't drink in high school. I was actually quite afraid of it. I was like a goody girl who would
Same.
call I would call my mom if I was at a party and somebody had a beer. I would be like, "Come and get me, Mom. They're
Yep.
drinking beer," and
Yeah.
I was afraid of it, and I didn't, I had goals. I was a smart girl. I did well in school, and I just wanted to be good. And so, yeah, I definitely had no interest in partying until I was really in my early 20s. After the experience I had in LA, I moved back and started working in bars and restaurants, going to school part-time, and kind of trying to figure out what does a real normal life look like, trying to do responsible things, I guess. And so I started drinking with that, the young crowd in your early 20s, where that's just kind of all there is. There's every night is a fine night to go out to the bar and have drinks. And I started recognizing pretty early that I would get more drunk than a lot of my friends, or I would black out and not remember. And that didn't seem to happen to everybody. I would do kind of embarrassing things or do things that were out of character. And it felt like I wasn't drinking any more than anyone else, but I was internalizing this behavior in a way that was leading to a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. But I would just power through it and want to be the fun girl, want to be the party girl who doesn't have, these things in her past that she's really not proud of. And also I think it's important to say that 100% I started drinking like that as a way to cope with trauma,
Yeah.
because I experienced a lot of really painful things between the ages of like 18 to 21, things that I didn't tell anyone because, that's what we do. We internalize these things like they're somehow our fault. And I lived that way for a really long time. So the drinking and the partying and being the fun drunk girl was really my way of escaping what I was feeling, which is that I had been, tainted in some way, that I was this walking reminder of a mistake all of the time. And so, looking back, I feel so much compassion for that version of me, because she was just surviving. She was just trying to deal with those painful emotions and memories and just wanting to fit in and feel normal. But at the same time, it was nearly impossible because I wasn't processing anything that had happened to me. And a 21, 22-year-old just doesn't understand that, especially if you don't have anyone in your life who really knows how to talk about those things, or you feel comfortable, talking about those things. So that really began this super toxic relationship with alcohol, where it was just easy. It was an easy thing to grab to turn off the voice in my head, right?
Yes.
That wanted to
Yes.
keep taking me back to the dark places. So
the
I
lies.
could check out. Yeah, for sure.
So it seems like, I mean, pretty early on, that you're starting to realize and recognize this is different. So what were you telling yourself though, in order, because you talked about how it really kind of went through to your early 30s.
Yeah.
So for 10 years, what do you feel like you were telling yourself in order to, I mean, were you saying, well, it's not really that bad? Or were you saying, you know what, maybe it is bad, but this is my only way to survive? What were the things that you were telling yourself?
Yeah. Well, I think, and it wasn't always the same. It didn't always look the same.
Mm.
I like to say I lived many different lives in the span of my first, 35 years. I ended up getting married in my mid-20s, and I had what seemed from the outside to be a super stable, super successful life. And I was kind of living a really normal existence, but still drinking, but doing it at, nice dinner parties and nice vacations. And my ex-husband was older than me, so I was in an older crowd, and I learned very quickly how to navigate that and how to appear to be what I needed to be. I really became a master chameleon. I think that stems from trauma and learning how to protect yourself, but it was really a skill that I don't think I realized I adapted until I got sober, to be honest. I could adapt to any situation and sort of become what I thought would get me the most safety and the most acceptance in any given situation. So I learned how to do that. And so, in my mid-20s, I was living that life. And then I moved to New York. I got signed with a big modeling agency, and I had this huge opportunity. And I was able to take advantage of that. I was able to put the drinking aside and focus on what I needed to focus on, and work at a super high level in that industry and maintain that. But as soon as chaos would come into my life, as soon as tragedy or, disruption would come into my life, I'd go get drunk, and then maybe that would start another sort of slippery slope of, now I'm drinking a little bit too much again. Now it's becoming a problem again. And I was always kind of fighting that. I could be really solid and really focused for months and months and months at a time, and on the outside appear very much that my life was going well. And internally, though, I could be living a completely different life that nobody would know. And eventually I would break when something was just too much, when something was the last straw, when my marriage fell apart, for example, or, I had some other sort of catastrophic thing happen. I would immediately be going down that road and sort of getting really mentally dark, drinking to cope. And it was just a cycle. It was just a constant toxic cycle that I would get myself out of eventually, but nevertheless, inevitably get right back into it.
We'll be right back after this. I think I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think, when we talk about alcohol use disorder, what we call, in a sense, alcoholism, which is now a spectrum, right? Which I love, is, I think, one of the things that people fail to understand, or where they get trapped in the old definition or the old look is, I mean, even in my worst year, or I should say the run up to my first year, or my worst year and a half, I went on a weight loss program. I lost 70 pounds. I was drinking maybe 2, if I was cheating, it was 3 drinks a week.
Yeah.
Well, an alcohol person with alcohol use disorder doesn't do that, right?
Right.
I'm fine, right?
Right.
I'm modeling. I'm with a big agency. I can put that, right? And yet, the place that it occupied in my mind, it sounds like the place that it occupied in your mind, was my escape. When things go bad, when things go wrong, I'm running back to that. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I think what's one of the things I want people who listen to this podcast to really internalize is that you can go through periods of not drinking and still have an alcohol problem. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're describing.
Yeah, I think, it can look very different at very different times and still be causing so much negative energy in your life. I think, I'm running 6 miles a day. I'm so concerned about what I eat, and I'm so invested in my health in all these other ways. And it was a lot of denial. I mean, the truth is, I just didn't have any other coping strategies. Alcohol became my coping strategy when I was young. And I stuck with it, you know? I found other things. I learned how to exercise, and I found yoga, and, you know, I always had this sort of spiritual side of me that even though I would go through hard times, like that was a constant for me, prayer and meditation and things like that. But the alcohol, like I couldn't see for so long that this thing that I thought was bringing me relief was actually just the catalyst for the whole cycle, you know. And
Mm.
you know, I was diagnosed with anxiety in my early 20s, mid 20s. I was medicated. I was on antidepressants and sleeping pills and all of that because I thought I was just a naturally anxious person. I
Mm.
thought that that would just be something I had to cope with and medicate really my whole life. And then I quit drinking, and turns out I didn't need any of that.
Mm.
I just needed to learn how to regulate my own nervous system.
That's
Um,
so fascinating. I
so
mean, I'm diagnosed with anxiety and OCD as well
yeah,
too, and I do still take medication for it. But what I have found is it is it is better. It is different, and also one of the things that scared me was, um, there's a lot of research on mixing alcohol with antidepressants, and it can be
yeah,
deadly. And I was like, just was ignoring that, you know. Um,
yeah.
and so, dang, there was a guy I think in our community who, I think he was a pastor and was on, I think he was on antidepressants and had just one glass of whiskey after a run and like had a heart attack, right? And I was like, oh
Wow.
my gosh. And I'm having way more than one glass of whiskey after a run,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I think it's good, right? I mean, I'm I'm still there using that to treat my mental health, and yet I know I'm doing it in a much healthier and safer way now,
Oh,
you know?
absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I am a huge supporter of medication
Yeah.
for people who need it. So not in any way to say that, but I know that, yeah, those medications and alcohol aren't meant to be mixed because they completely change the way that your body is processing and metabolizing it. And so it can be harmful. Like you said, it can actually cause like physical problems like the heart stuff, or it can just reduce even the efficacy of the drug. And
Effectiveness, yeah.
so it's like you're going to continually think you need more or something
Yes.
else when
Yes.
actually it wasn't ever given a chance to properly work for you, you know?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I will say this. I'm on a daily medication. I have something for panic attacks. I can't tell you the last time I took my panic attack medication because I can't tell you the last time I had a panic attack, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I couldn't say that while I was drinking, you know? So when you kind of look back, you talk about this moment where you wake up, right? And not just physically, but it also seems emotionally and spiritually. But what was happening leading up to that kind of enlightenment moment? Had
Oof.
it gotten like, was there something in particular that happened? Was your drink, were you just like, man, my drinking is so bad? What was it like leading up to that moment of illumination that which is what you call it, which I think is great.
Yeah, man, it was everything that could go wrong did go wrong in my life in the kind of 6 months leading up to that moment. I had been living in LA for the second time, and what started off as a great stint there had really, really just regressed into kind of a chaotic and really unfocused time in my life. I was in a relationship that ended and moved back home. I had spent some time in Europe, essentially just trying to run away from my life, and had just come back to Tennessee and was kind of in between. I didn't know where I was going to be living, what I was going to be doing. my career was just completely dried up. Wasn't getting auditions. I wasn't getting work. I looked terrible. I felt terrible. And it wasn't that my drinking was necessarily at some all-time high. It wasn't, I remember the night before this happened, the night before I woke up and made that decision, I had gone to happy hour with my sister and had 2 beers. And that was it. And I spent the night at her house. I was at her house when I woke up that morning. And I wasn't particularly hungover or anything. It was just this very sort of slow, subtle decline that had at times not been so subtle or slow, but the cumulative energy of those 10, 15 years of my life was that I had slowly reduced myself to a version of me that I just didn't recognize anymore. The light was gone, the brightness, the optimism. I was looking at the world through very gray lenses, and I just had this moment of absolute clarity where it was like, you can continue this. You can continue the way you've been living. You can continue drinking, partying, being this version of you, or you can possibly see actually what you're capable of. And there is no third option. And it just was presented to me that simply. It was like status quo, maybe be the greatest of all time at something. There is no secret other choice, Yeah. And I was just like, oh my God, like oh my God, I can't, what am I doing? I could be dead next week. Like, we got to go. Like, we got to get serious. And I just had this sense of, okay, I'm done. It was like called and answered. Like, you're done. Okay, I'm done. Let's go. What's next? Wow. And I just accepted that in a way that I don't know if I've ever accepted anything, it was just this like very calm question and answer. And wow. I moved on from that place really, really sure that that's what I wanted.
So this moment happens. I mean, you're telling, I assume, I mean, you're at your sister's, right? I don't know. Do you tell your sister, like, what were those around you thinking as you take this pretty drastic, make this pretty drastic move? What were they saying?
Yeah. So I didn't tell anyone for maybe a couple of weeks. I think I was sort of simmering in, what does this even mean? Like, this is weird, because I didn't really know any sober people. I didn't even know how a person does that because, I've been living my life for so long with this belief that alcohol is just an evergreen accessory that goes with everything. Yeah. How do you then live a life without it? And how do you even relate to people? And so I think it was like a couple weeks I told my sister, hey, I'm not drinking right now or anymore. And she was like, okay, do you think just for a little bit, or you think like you're never going to drink again? And, it's funny, those questions, because you're like, well, that's crazy. And I think I said, I don't know for sure what it means, but I just know I shouldn't have any at all for the foreseeable future. And I think that's kind of how it's, I left it with her. And then I told a couple other very close friends. I think I told my dad and my other sister. But for the most part, I kept it pretty private for the first few months. And that would change when I decided to create a whole Instagram page about it. And then eventually show my face on there. And that just came with accumulating these days, weeks, months, and going, oh my God, like, this is like the secret to life. Like, this is like the greatest thing that's ever happened. I have to tell people this, because I was so afraid my life was going to be so boring and so dull.
Yeah.
And it's just the opposite. So, like, I must tell the people, you know?
So when do you feel, how far into your sobriety did you realize, to your sister's point, and I think especially like as people face, I think the holidays are a really important time where people will get that question a lot. If you're not drinking, well, how long for how long is this a phase? Is this a thing? So how far into your sobriety did you kind of realize this isn't just an experiment? This is a new way of living.
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked me that question because I think the most honest answer is that I knew. I knew that morning when I decided that I was going to quit. I knew it had to be forever. I don't think
Yeah.
I had articulated that to anyone or even maybe to myself, but I knew that. I knew that there was not going to be some in between place that I was going to find. I knew that I had tried living my life one way and it left me very unfulfilled, discontent, disillusioned, disconnected. And now I needed to live my life this other way.
Mm-hmm.
And that was going to be a completely new path, but I had to fully buy into it. I had to fully commit to that, I think. And so I think just that knowing, like that, not giving myself any out, of no, like, no, it's this or that. And right now you're going to choose and you're going to
Yeah.
completely commit to that. And I know that that doesn't work for, that's not to say that's how everyone's mind works, but I also like to say that everyone's mind works differently and we're all very motivated and incentivized by very different things. And for me, it was that feeling of there's all these things I'm so desperate to offer the world, to create, to be part of. And that moment of realizing that I might be squandering and sabotaging any chance I had of that just to avoid feeling some painful stuff, was no longer worth it. It was no longer acceptable. And, you know, turns out that it's the actually feeling the things and looking at the things that is what heals them.
Oh, yes. Okay, talk
Yeah.
about, because it sounds like you've done, maybe some therapy or you've done some
Yeah.
introspection. Like, talk about that,
Yeah.
because I think that's one thing that people have a hard time with. And I mean, I had a hard time with it, right? It's like, no, I don't want to feel that, right? That's why I
Yeah.
drink, I think that, I'm not the first one to say this, but like my problem wasn't alcohol. My problem was all the problems I had, and alcohol was my solution, right?
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
talk about the power that you found in actually sitting with and facing the feelings. I mean, obviously for me, as a person of faith, obviously I found that, inviting Jesus into that space has been so good. But talk about what you have found in sitting with and facing those feelings.
Yeah. I think what I found, actually, I could weep thinking about it because, what it took was for me to just be brutally honest. Like, to actually, yes, there was some therapy, but so much of my healing has been in writing my story and just getting it out in a physical form where I then have to look at it and see it somewhere else than inside of me, right? It's like I needed to expel these sort of stories that I had been telling myself to see what was true. Like I had to get it out of here and get it somewhere else. And so much of that has been looking at the truth, remembering, like truly taking myself and walking myself through some of the most painful moments of my life, years of my life, and actually talking about what that felt like. Because I didn't do that for so long. I just tried to bury it. And that is really hard work. because it brings up everything again. But what happens is that when you bring something out into the light and you get super honest and you look at it and you really face it without trying to escape or make the feeling disappear, you take its power away. Because when, for so long, this is something that I realized was that, for example, I experienced a very abusive and violent relationship when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. And for so long, I was so ashamed. I was so ashamed that I had gotten myself into this situation. Like there must have been something terribly wrong with me that I would end up in this position. Do you know what I mean? Like, didn't I know better? Wasn't I smarter? How could I not have possibly gotten myself out of that? So for so long, instead of looking at that, I would drink, I would smoke, I would want to just quiet it all out like it didn't happen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but what
absolutely.
But what I realized was that every time I did that, every single time I drank to forget about that thing and that person, it was almost as if I was letting them do those things to me again and again and again.
Wow.
And something clicked when I realized that. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to let you do this to me one more time. So I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to look at it. And then I'm going to fully put it away. I get to decide where this goes. I keep trying to erase it and bury it, but that doesn't serve me, right? That serves this other person and this thing. And so that was really powerful. So I just started doing that with all of these things in my life, some big, some small, and really a lot of time spent in solitude, a lot of time spent reading and writing and with myself, which had been something that was hard for me to do for a long time, right? Because that's a scary place to be, alone with yourself. And so I tell people that that's really where it starts, that willingness to spend some time just with you and maybe God, and really talk about the stuff that you've been hiding a lot of times from yourself for a really long time.
You wrote this beautiful, beautiful piece about going back to New York City. And I think, I resonated with it on a lot of levels. One of them being, I lived in New York City for 7 years. And there was a period of time where that was, it wasn't my worst drinking time, but I think I actually formulated some of the excuses that I used for decades during that time. Because culturally, I write about this in my book, but culturally it was like, you go anywhere and you bring a bottle of wine, like it's just like that was just it, right? Like we went to church home group and everyone brought a bottle of wine, like there's some people like, oh, it's like, that's just what it was. Right.
Yeah.
And so you wrote this beautiful piece on your Substack blog, and you talk about going back there and kind of facing New York and those experiences and those, like, even those physical places and seeing them as a sober person. Talk about what that was like, and also in a sense as a metaphor for like facing, maybe not our physical places, but there are certain experiences. For some people, it's like you've never had a holiday without alcohol. And so what does it look like to face that in the context of going back to New York City?
Yeah. I think it's important to say that New York was always like my pinnacle. It was always the shiny star on top of the pyramid of like where I wanted to get to and where I wanted to be. And I just thought if I could somehow get into that city and get it to accept me, that I would be just living my happiest life and I would feel fulfilled and accepted and validated by the world, right? So I think there was a huge pain point around New York for a long time for me because I left it in kind of a low place. And I think I always worried that I could never go back there, that I could never have the New York experience that I so wanted, even though I did have a couple of years of really like living that dream. The last year that I was there was pretty dark, and I just felt like I kind of squandered the opportunity for a long time. And so when I would go and visit, which I would do several times after I left there, I would always sort of have this sort of weird jealousy, of like, I don't live here anymore and it's not my city anymore. And I almost don't even want to be here because I'm not part of it. And felt like, the one that got away, which I think I wrote in that piece. And it always kind of felt like that. And then what this trip did for me, I think, was, again, it's rewriting a story for yourself, right? You go and you show up in that place as a new version of yourself and suddenly realize like there's a whole new story to be written here. And just because this one stretch of time I spent here, now 10 years ago is over, doesn't mean there's not a whole new book to be written here. And I think I just had this moment of gratitude of like, wow, we get to rewrite this story over and over and over again. And I love to think I'm at the beginning of my love affair with New York and not the end. It's just a different one. And that's been true for me in so many places and with so many experiences. Like you said, even just sometimes your first holiday without drinking, it can feel like, well, this is not even going to be the same experience. Well, yeah, it might not, actually. It might be totally different, and you should be open to that, right? I think we hold on to these nostalgic traditions, especially around the holidays, where we just are holding so tightly to how it's always been that we miss the opportunity to let those things evolve. And we can do that with ourselves too. And so that's what sobriety has also brought me, is this ability to kind of release a little bit of my grip off of people, places, and things, and not want to keep them in place so much and want to watch them grow and watch them expand, because I realized that that's how we evolve and we become better versions of ourselves, right? We're not meant to stay the same.
We'll be right back after this. So, you have a community online, and where you walk people through sobriety, especially for creatives, and so it's called the Creative Sobriety Academy. And you have these kind of 4 pillars, and I'd love for you to talk about them a little bit. These 4 pillars: the illumination, buy-in, the process, and the new life. Explain those 4 pillars as part of the Sobriety Academy.
Yeah, so the Academy was really the format I decided to take as far as putting out what is my strategy for sobriety, because it's not traditional. It doesn't fit into a box. And I feel like there are a lot of people who are looking for sort of an alternative approach to getting sober, who might not feel seen in some traditional rooms and programs and things like that. And that was very much my experience. And so my 4-part process is, yes, the illumination, which we kind of talked about earlier, is really that moment of clarity and recognizing it as a moment of clarity, and then taking the steps to investigate that, which is really pulling all that stuff out of the closet, out of the dark holes in our brains that we bury things in, and looking at it and doing that work that we talked about of getting really honest about, why are we drinking? Why are we doing this? Yeah. Because maybe we've never actually asked ourselves that question, or at least with, leaving space for an honest answer. And then,
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and yeah, I think it's just like, I want to remove the shame for people there. It's like, there's no wrong answer, man. Like, life is hard. Being a human is like really challenging, and there's no roadmap or blueprint for this. So maybe you made some choices as a survival skill, and you get to change your mind. You get to do something different now. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it that way. Let's just get honest about it and make a new choice, and then the next step is what I call the buy-in, which is really just another way of saying this radical faith in what this new version of you and this new version of your life could look like, what it could bring, believing that there's something better. Because again, it's like, it's like spirituality. It's like God. It's like believing in the thing you can't see,
Mm-hmm.
but you believe that there is something more beautiful on the other side of what you've known before. And it takes every bit of faith that we can muster to wake up every day and say, I'm not going to drink. It'd be so much easier if I just checked out and didn't feel this thing.
Yep.
So, you have to have this radical belief that actually doing this super hard work is going to bring you something beyond your wildest dreams. Otherwise, why would you do it? Why would you do it? So you have to believe that there's this beautiful plot twist that awaits you if you can stay this course. Process is all about pruning and sifting through your life. What serves this new version of me? What doesn't? What does this new version of me do every day? What does she wear? What does she eat for dinner? Who does she hang out with? Right? And really
which is so good, by the way, because I think there's a lot of people that I've talked to that like there's some practical things you have to plan, right? Like, and I quit cold turkey, had withdrawal symptoms, wasn't great, and like there were times I'm literally like just pacing because I don't know what to do. I spent so much time drinking that like I forgot what else to do, right? So I love that, right? Like, what does this new version of me do at 6 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night when the kids are in bed and I'd normally be at least 4 bourbons in already? What do I do?
Yeah. What does this person do? Like, if I can imagine the healthiest, most successful, creative, thriving version, like, what does she do at 9 o'clock at night, And I'm like, oh, well, gosh, she's probably reading, she's probably getting smarter. She's probably like learning a new thing or, writing a new thing or like creating something. Like, so yeah, you have to get specific because it's like, if you can't see it, I know this is so cheesy, but like, if you can't see it, how are you going to be it? Right. It's like, you gotta visualize this stuff. And then the fourth one is this new life, and it's really just kind of a repeating steps 1 through 3 over and over and over and over. And you get to this place where you have this new way of moving through the world, and you will move hell or high water to protect it. It's gotta be the thing that that you protect at all costs. And I think that comes with seeing the other side. That comes with seeing the fruit of your labor. That comes with seeing the, everything come to pass as you put in this really hard work, faith, and time. You get to a place where you wouldn't trade it for the world.
I can definitely agree with that. And you've used this term a couple times, and I love it. And you talked about the other side, right? And so I have an aunt back in Wisconsin, where I'm from, and she works with a lot of Alzheimer's patients. She works for an aging resource center, and then really works with a lot of families. And of people who have dementia or Alzheimer's. And I remember there was one time we had a difficult situation in our family, and my aunt was giving me some advice on what to say, and she said, they called me Johnny growing up. That's my name, Johnny. She goes, Johnny, one thing that I say, and it's become so effective in my line of work is, and I try to repeat it as much as possible, is when I'm dealing with families who are just in the throes of dealing with someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, is I talk about the other side, and that there is another side, that there is a way through this, and there will be a time where you are on the other side. And I've kind of toyed with a little bit about like turning that into an essay, and I think I will. But I just love that you've repeated that the other side, right? Like, and so I think for people listening to this, like there is an other side, right? And that may not seem possible, that may not seem like even feasible right now, but there is another side, and I'm a testament to that. And I think Kristen is obviously a testament to that as well. So thank you for using that term. I don't know how intentional that was, but it's like yes, the other side. We can get there. We can get there for sure. You are someone. This is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on as well. Not just your story, which is great, but is you have kind of become really enthralled and really dove into the non-alcoholic drink space. And I will say this, there was a period in my drinking journey, I think it was one of those times where I've given up alcohol like more times than I can count, right? You know what I mean? It's just like it became like a thing, right? It's like, well, okay, I'm not drinking this week or whatever. And during one of those stints, I tried some of these non-alcoholic spirits, and they were awful. Like awful. I think that single-handedly like drove me back to drinking. I think I need to sue the non-alcoholic drink space of 2018, 19 or something, because it was just gross. But yet I see your Instagram, and you are singing the praises of some of these non-alcoholic drinks. And so I would love for you, as a non-alcoholic drink skeptic, I will say I drink from time to time non-alcoholic beer. That has changed in a great way. Like, holy cow, I cannot believe I'm like drinking this like Stella Zero, and I'm like, I mean, I haven't had a Stella in a couple of years, but I'm like, this kind of tastes like a Stella that I remember. It's great. So tell me how the non-alcoholic drink space has changed, and convince me, like, what are some of your favorites that I should try?
Oh man. I mean, I love this, and I'm working on a couple different projects right now specifically around this, because I just want people to know what's available to them now and how far it's come, because John, you are not wrong. I mean, back in 2018, 2019, 2020, when I got sober, I mean, the options were dark, and they were they were not good. I mean, there were people passing off, pretty much like grape juice as non-alcoholic wine, and everybody. Yeah, I mean, it was a sad time, but I can say it was. But
I tried this non-alcoholic gin, and I was like, some people are like, well, regular gin tastes like Pine Sol or Four Finger. No, regular gin tastes great to me. Whatever this crap was, this
tastes like Pine Sol.
That tastes like Pine Sol or something.
They literally just put Pine Sol in a jar, and they were like, here you go.
No alcohol.
This is better for you. Yeah. No, alcohol-free Pine Sol. No, it's true. It's true. The options were really scary. And it's just, that's not the case anymore. But what's happened is, I think this movement that is undeniable, which is the sober curious movement, the modern sobriety movement, has really fueled the non-alc beverage space. And it's brought these really creative, really smart, really innovative, dreaming, like visionaries out into the space and into the market. And they're rising to the occasion, and they're creating products that are complex, adult, sophisticated, and realizing that there's this huge demand in the market for people who just don't want to drink for whatever reason, but don't want to be treated like a child when they go to order a drink or when they go to pick something up for a party. Like, I want to feel like I'm also celebrating. I want to feel like I'm connecting and bringing something cool to drink. Like, that's it. It's so simple. We just want interesting beverage options, and that's available now. And so I think I'm excited about where it's at, and I'm super excited about where it's going. Specifically, I would say in the non-alc wine category. I think that has jumped leaps and bounds. I mean, we are so far from like Martinelli's sparkling cider. We are living in a whole new world, because now what's happening is they're taking these really quality high point wines and they are de-alcoholizing them. So they're no longer offering these, and some people are, but you're no longer just seeing wine alternatives where they're putting a bunch of tea and juice and whatever in a bottle and being like, here's wine. You're
like, this is a concoction like my 6-year-old son would make.
Yeah.
When he
this
just
isn't wine.
Yeah, when he just like throws a bunch of ingredients he finds in the counter, and you're like, "Look here it is. It's a non-alcoholic drink."
Yeah, it's like a suicide. Like here's a non-alc suicide soda, and you can call it wine. It's like call it whatever you want. No, thank you. Like, no, I don't want that. But now we're seeing this new technology, and we're seeing these winemakers all over the world, really, who see the demand in the market and are going, okay, well, how can we get a piece of this? Because we can see the trend moving, and we don't want to be the last one here to catch the train, because that's what's happening. Society and our culture is really, really looking for non-alc, and that's not going anywhere. That's only getting bigger. And I think next year we're going to see that demand rise exponentially with a lot of new information that's coming out about alcohol, and as far as the health regulations and guidelines go. We're on trend right now to get some new guidelines around alcohol next year. And I think all of that, combined with the fact that this modern sobriety movement has already left the station and people are on board, I think we're just going to see the non-alc sector boom continually. And that's great for us, people who don't drink, because our options are going to get just bigger and better, more interesting, more accessible. I think we're going to start seeing bars and restaurants with really, really curated, well thought out, adult, zero proof menus. And that's just going to be the norm.
I cannot wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite, real quick? Do you have a favorite like non-alc wine or non-alc, mixer?
Well, I mean, for wine, by far, it's Geronimo. So this is an Australian winemaker, an Australian winemaking couple who basically took a 98-point wine and decided to de-alcoholize it because she was pregnant and wanted to drink they call it the Leonis blend. So they went through that process and realized, oh, wow, we have this incredible non-alcoholic wine. And for me, it's truly the best that I've tried. It's kind of the Austrian version of like a Cab and a Merlot mixed together, but they're Austrian grapes, so I'm not going to try to pronounce them. But it's just a super dry, like full-bodied red wine experience, and you get the aroma, you get the taste and texture, mouthfeel of a red wine, and I haven't seen it anywhere else. And they also have a sparkling that's great and a couple other ones, but so that would be my wine pick. And I'm also super into the functional beverage space. So like adaptogens, like things that are good for you in your drinks, things that are good for your brain and kind of elevate mood without changing anything in your head,
Yeah.
right? So I really love stuff like ashwagandha and rhodiola and all these different herbs and roots and things that people are putting into drinks. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. So I like things like Curious Elixirs. Aplos is another really great brand doing that. And there's so many, but
Yeah.
there's competition now, which is what we need, right? Like there's now this
Yep.
kind of requirement of quality in the sector.
Right.
And so that's bringing out some competition, which is a good thing.
That is a great thing. Kristen, if people want to connect with you, if they want to check out your academy, if they want to check out your writing, where's the best place for them to go?
So the best place where you can find all of that would be creativesobriety.co. That's my website, and you'll be able to link to the community, the academy, Substack, podcast, Instagram, all of it. So that's where everything's at. And then the best place to just kind of find me hanging out and shoot a message would be Instagram. I try to, answer messages on there every day. And sometimes I'm better at that than others, but I would love to connect with you. And yeah, I'd love to have you join the community. We do a lot of different stuff. My favorite thing is a weekly Zoom meetup we do every Tuesday evening. And it's just kind of a safe place where you can come and we talk about being sober. We usually have a subject of the week and everybody gets a chance to say something if they want, but it's very low pressure. It's not super formal, and it's just a good thing to have on your calendar if you're trying to meet some other sober people in like a low pressure vibe.
I love that. Well, that's awesome. Thank you. So, creativesobriety.co, and we'll link it as well. Yeah. Kristen, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing your tips. Thanks for convincing me that I should give non-elk spirits and wine another shot, which I will. And I just really appreciate the message that you're spreading. And I want to thank you. I mean, there wasn't, the fact that there is so, a growing number of people who are talking about this and you're helping lead the charge. I just really appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate everything you're doing. And I can't wait to read your book when it comes out next year and support you with that. So I'll be excited to stay tuned.
Thanks, Kristen. So many good things in there, right? I think there's one thing that's really stuck with me, and it's that, in a sense, that thought experiment that Kristen talked about, which is, what does the healthiest version of you do at 9 p.m.? And then that's the life you want to build, right? And I think I've thought a lot about that, right? And the healthiest version of me at 9 p.m. is tucking in my kids. It is spending time with my wife. It is reading a good book. And it is thinking on the things that matter most, like thinking on the spiritual things and what can I be doing for Christ and how can I be making a difference? And, I think sometimes it's really hard for us, especially in the throes of addiction, to imagine a life on the other side of this. And this is whatever you're going through, right? And yet that thought experiment, I think, helps, because I think one of the devil's greatest tools is to remove hope. And I've been there, and sometimes I am there, right? There are things even going on in my life right now that are, I'm like, where do I see the hope, Lord? I need to be reminded of the hope. And our pastor preached a sermon this past Sunday regarding that, and I needed it so bad. And so I want you to remember, like, there is another side. You may not see it, but it's there. And I think it's better than you can imagine, especially when you partner with Jesus on that. So I hope that episode was helpful for you. Really appreciative for Kristen. Go check out Creative Sobriety. If you appreciate this episode, please like, rate, the show that really helps get the message out to other people. I think hopefully we're 11 episodes in now. And if you've noticed, like, yes, this is a show about sobriety and addiction, but I think it has so many far-reaching implications to a lot of other things in people's lives. And so, if you agree, rate the show, like it, comment, share it. And then also go visit our partner, Life Audio. LifeAudio.com has plenty of other great podcasts like this one. My friends Christy Osborne and Need Shirley have a podcast over there. I believe Greg Laurie just partnered with Life Audio, and he has a great podcast over there. So please check out Life Audio Network. We will see you back here next week for another episode of Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic.